see on my screen. Michael, are you here? Because I did let you know that we are running a little bit late.
Yeah, I'm here. Hey.
Oh, here you are. Perfect. So I would like to welcome Michael to our class. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. So Michael, you already know him. I think I sent in the announcement. You already know him as the data guy on TikTok, and he has garnered a following of almost, I think, 100,000 Ks at this moment to engage his audience in AR and AR data stories. So he is not only a data visualization or a data designer, but he's also an AR specialist and also now an influencer. So I can't wait. We can't wait to hear more from you. You also have your own company, which is called Possible Immersive. So please tell us a little bit more about that. And also, when I did a little bit of research on you, I did see that you did create a hacking marathon, a hackathon for artists, engineers, and entrepreneurs, where you did something that I would love to hear more about. It was something with like teaching a robot to paint or something. So maybe you have a little bit of time at the very end to tell us a little bit about that. But as of now, for everyone, this is going to be an interactive session. So have your smartphones, your tools ready. You might have to walk around the room as well. So I think this is going to be the great final part of our day today to wrap it up. And yeah, I think the floor is yours, Michael. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniela. And thank you for that warm introduction. And it's nice to virtually meet everybody here. I'm impressed you've done some digging here to find some other of my activities. And yeah, I'm happy to elaborate a bit on that towards the end. But let me just give a little bit of background on myself and then dive into more of the content. Prior to my time here at Flow, I was a management consultant. So I jokingly say that I'm a recovering management consultant, making up for all of these PowerPoints that I've given in my life, and really saw Flow as this next iteration of how we more effectively communicate with data at its core. And I feel like you guys are all sort of case in points. The exact reason why most slideware sort of falls short is that we're all sitting virtually trying to interact with one another, and all we're basically doing is just watching our screen. We could just record this and watch it later, and it'd sometimes be the same. So unless you have that interaction, it's sort of like, what's the point? So anyways, I'm going to go through a lot of different things here, but prior to my time as a management consultant, I was at MIT for my MBA, and then prior to that was also in consulting, but on the technology side. So I've always sort of played at the intersection of technology and business. And I got to experience this firsthand on my consulting projects, where the problem was not finding the insight in data. Building the predictive model was typically actually one of the easier things we did. The hard thing was, how do we communicate this effectively to the executive team in a way that actually they can understand? So just giving them the black box didn't really help. It was making sure they actually understood the algorithm and what we were doing. And that ended up just being this churn. Like we would just churn screenshots of Tableau, paste it into PowerPoints, and add circles and annotations, and keep iterating on that in our messaging. So it felt like there had to be a better way. So anyways, that's just a little bit of backgrounds. And then as Daniela sort of alluded to, I've been, I guess, garnering a bit of a following on social media, basically giving these AR presentations. And so my wife gives me a hard time and jokingly says that she calls me like the AR weatherman, where basically I'm sort of doing a weatherman style report, but with just other types of data. And I thought that was, it's an okay way to describe it. I'm totally fine with that. So yeah, let's have some interaction here and actually start to dive in. So let me go ahead and start here. So what I'm showing you is Flow. So Flow is a software solution for data storytelling, and that includes this ability to both see my face and see the content at the same time. So we try to integrate into everything. We're not trying to be a standalone everything. We're trying to integrate into Zoom, integrate into Teams, integrate into other social VR platforms and things like that. So ultimately, what we're solving for are three fundamental data communication problems. One is levels of engagement. Is your audience actually paying attention, or are they all checking their email, doing something else while you're presenting? Two is levels of understanding, especially when it comes to data topics. Do they actually understand, or are they sort of nodding along in agreement? And then third is levels of interaction, which I think is super critical. It drives the other two, but if you can actually have people participate in the meeting and feel like they're involved, that's how you start to drive your audience to actually pay attention and be part of the meeting. And so all of this is geared towards driving better data-driven decisions, and in a sales use case, driving more sales conversions. And so data storytelling fits in this in-between zone, in between presentations, the emotion that you can convey and the story you can convey with a presentation, and the logic and the data visualization side of analysis. So thinking of data storytelling as sort of this blend of combining the emotional and the narrative capabilities with the logical and data visualization capabilities drives huge impact. And so that's what we are focused on. Flow Immersive is a data storytelling platform focused on specifically that. How do we more effectively communicate? So there's a big difference there between communication. I'm so glad, Randy, you had mentioned it. Communication versus analysis or discovery. And we are very much on the side of communication and less on the side of discovery. There is sort of this fantasy that I'm going to throw my data into 3 dimensions and suddenly every insight in the world is going to like come reveal itself to me, sort of Minority Report-esque. And unfortunately, that's not quite the case. It still requires some ability to analyze the information first. But when it comes to communicating it, that's where we start to excel. So as a very basic example, and we'll go into a lot more better examples of data stories. This is one I tell just to show how one data set can tell 3 different stories. So one story here is looking at the US election from 2020, and Donald Trump would look at a map like this and say that the whole country voted red because we see this large landmass of red. But that the counter argument to that is that land doesn't vote, people vote. And that if we adjust the size of these bars based on the number of votes that were cast, a very different story emerges. But to the point of like interaction, let me actually get you guys involved here as opposed to just sitting back. And so I'll do this 2 ways. I'm going to leave a QR code up here. If I can encourage you to use your phone, and if you open up the camera on your phone, you can scan this QR code, as well as I don't know if you can do it directly from the browser. Yeah, so anyways, that's how you'll join. And then I'll also copy and paste this URL into the chat window if you would prefer to join from your computer. So I'll let people take a minute or 2 to join in. You'll be able to enter your name and move around. So you can see how I see everyone in the scene together here on their phones. And you'll also notice that there's an AR button in the top right-hand corner. If you're feeling adventurous and curious enough to want to go into that, I would encourage you to do so. It will actually enter you into augmented reality mode, and you can actually walk around the content in your room, which will make sense for other visualization types. And yeah, it is pretty awesome actually when we get to certain elements here. So I'm just going to point out a few things here. So as I see everyone joining, this is pretty cool to see the sheer quantity in here. And so I do have control to hide avatars. I'm going to leave them on for a moment. People might be getting in the way of each other, but I'll just encourage people to move a bit. So if you click and drag your mouse, or on your screen, if you tap and move around, that's going to be how you move around the scene. And so some of the small things I want to quickly point out to the level of interaction, just this idea that someone can point to a dot and click on it is actually a very empowering thing. And sorry, I accidentally skipped a step here. Where was I? Here. There we go. Give me 1 sec. I have an experimental build running, and let me do one thing real quick. I'm just going to quickly show this on my screen and then close it because it's killing my memory. This is a visual I've just been working on that I'm like super excited about, that is looking at population density. And I think the most interesting thing here to me was just when you don't use a log scale and you actually show the actual quantities, just how big cities are compared to most of the other part of the country. So I'll get to that later, but I'm gonna have to close this right now because it's killing my my computer. Okay, there we go. So this idea that I can click on a dot and you can see what I'm clicking on, that we can pull up some additional information, this idea that you're exploring the content along with me, I think is a natural occurrence, right? Like we want to explore, but we still want to be somewhat directed. So I can move things forward here in the last element to this story, which is to change the colors so that, I'm going to hide the avatars actually. So changing these colors here to be more illustrative of the real ratio between Democrats to Republicans. So the country is far more purple than it is just red or blue, so less binary. So 3 different stories, all from the same data set. And so I show this as a first example just because it's very easy to understand, to see the value of seeing things in a spatial representation. But more importantly, that within this, that, the point is not to have a deep conversation about politics, but rather to illustrate how showing data through different lenses allows you to understand it in a different way. And each of those little elements of your understanding builds your mental model of this election. And I feel like after you see, at least this in the US, like you sort of have a pretty innate understanding of cities and where votes are coming from and sort of the distribution in the US. And I feel like it's just a very easy one to wrap our heads around. But to extend that further, what is data? Data is not just geospatial information, but one of our more popular data stories I put out there was actually talking about how COVID actually propagates through a population. So looking at things like network graphs. And this is what we're looking at when it comes to just this is a mathematical representation of disease spread, where it's, 1 goes to 2, 2 goes to 4, 4 goes to 8, but actually how COVID actually replicates through a population is actually much different. And it's a fascinating thing that I can go through at a separate time. And then lastly here, just showing time series data. So this is in the United States, we're looking at 5 different retailers. So the Home Depot, which is like a home improvement store, Target, which is like general retail, McDonald's, which is food, Costco, which is like groceries, and Starbucks, which is coffee. And so if we look at the beginning of the year, things are pretty normal. Starbucks is doing okay with people in the winter getting their winter lattes. And then the summer comes and we have everyone going to the Home Depot. But I think it's interesting to see this huge drop off in March where the start of the pandemic hits. You can see this rush to go to Costco and get toilet paper. And then we're all sick of, or not sick of being home, but we've seen so many issues in our house such that we need to go to the Home Depot and grab supplies to go fix up our place. And so obviously I'm making up this narrative to go on top of this layer, but this idea of adding that narrative on top of the data layer. People remember stories, right? They don't remember data and they don't remember specific numbers. They remember the story, the emotion that they felt during something. And that's what we're trying to get to. It's combining that logic and the emotion that is really what we're after. So I'll pause there and I'll go through a bunch of other examples that will be more fun and interactive here. Yeah, we'd love to get people's initial takes or any questions that have come up so far. I'll put back on the so people can see each other. I think this might be, are we at 48 people or 50? It's cool. This might be one of it might be doing some performance testing here unintentionally. So this is good. Because 50 is about where we've, reached our peak last time. So yeah, any questions or anything? Otherwise, I'll keep trucking through here. But to the point of being this interactive, I'll open it up.
I very much immersed here in your data visualization tool. But please, anyone who has a question, feel free to ask and shoot.
I don't have a question directly, but I think it's great fun, and really can, if this is like for use commercially, and you can like imagine preparing meetings in a business context using like still everyone will be on the phone, but at least they will all focus on the matter and like exploring the data. So I think that's a great picture. So it's great fun to explore data like that.
I like how you describe that. That's pretty clever. Yeah, people are on their phone anyways, might as well just to be part of the meeting. That is one point that we've learned. I don't know if learning the hard way is the right way to describe it, but I would describe it as you want to meet people where they are. I'd say 3 years ago, we really focused on VR and AR as our prime methodology for our value in the world. And while I will say that all of what we do looks absolutely incredible in a headset and is by far like the best way to experience this content. So this is one I made actually April of last year when COVID, we hit our first wave, and I thought it was going down at that moment. But here I'm using an AR headset and still just recording on a 2D screen, or sorry, on a cell phone camera. So there's no post-production in this. But this used to be how we sort of showed to the world. It was like, we're focused on the AR aspect, and that's the thing that we want to drive. And what we learned is that, yes, that's the most ideal experience, but the way you get people there is by meeting where they are and showing sort of a FOMO effect to get there, as opposed to forcing them to have this experience. So I don't know if that makes sense, but the hardest thing to do is to try to sell a headset. That's by far one of the hardest things to do in the enterprise today, because if you try to sell a headset to a 6-year-old executive, good luck. Like you're not going to get far, I don't think, or you might have a few instances where you get far. But if you're able to translate it and to say, yes, this works on flat screens, it works on mobile, and it's about the engagement, it's about these other elements. And yes, there's going to be people that go into headset to have sort of the most ideal experience. We sort of meet people where they are. So that's something I'd say we've just learned over the time in terms of where to meet people. And so, even just these little clips of data visualizations and stories that go along with it. We started these AR videos on mobile really as a way to help showcase what does it look like when you're in headset, but it became a product in and of itself, right? It became a product to better convey and actually is quite utilized by our community today. And so speaking of sort of that community, I'm going to close this meeting out. So I'm going to end this one and kick everyone out of this one. We can go into some other ones here. But I just want to quickly show you the flow editor, which is how we build all of these. And we've just been opening up our beta access, and we actually just finished our first group today or yesterday, which was pretty exciting. And it looks like
Michael, there has been a question in the chat from Anna, which is how far along is the technology? She can already think of a gazillion different use cases.
Oh, great. It's real. It's here today. Some of our biggest customers are the World Bank, the United Nations Development Program is also a customer of ours. Actually, they're our biggest customer, and then Deloitte Consulting, and then we have a few others that we're in conversations with but haven't closed yet. And then BlackRock, but they're not a current customer. That was prior arrangements that's still in conversations with. So give me just a moment here. Okay, so create a flow. So what I'm showing on my, so does that answer that question for the technology? Happy to address more.
Maybe another question. So how are the customers really using the technology? So what are the use cases? Is it more like for keynotes or customer presentations, or is it also in the day-to-day operations?
Great question. So on that communication front, where we've seen adoption earliest is in any external communications, so less internal use cases and more external. Most of the time in sales use cases is where we're seeing the initial drive. So people trying to sell a software solution or something where they have metrics around what the improvement is, or something where they need to drive an audience. Actually, one of the best use cases is anything that's very boring, because if you have a very boring product, you can't get people's attention. That, the numbers sort of speak for themselves, but if you can actually present it in a way that engages your audience, that's partly how you're driving that adoption. So that's where we start. And I say that because you start there because it has the highest return on investment. But then over time, as people just use it more, that you start to spread into more internal use cases and things that drive less return on investment. So any new technology needs to start in its highest value spot first, and then move on from there. And so I highly encourage anyone that's going to use this to start in sort of those high value external areas before moving more internally. Include how long it is. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I mean, what's cool about what we work on is that everyone's sort of seen it in the movies. We've all seen like Avatar, Minority Report, Star Wars. It's like, okay, we've all accepted that the world is going to have these holograms sitting in front of us, and we're going to interact with tables, or at least every movie we've seen says that. But we sort of skip the step of like what's meaningful and how would we actually use that. And so it's funny to look back at these movies and like, man, that makes no sense why you would want to show something like that after actually working in the design of like what the 3D environment should look like and what the interaction should be. But making it practical and usable today, there are a lot of data visualization types that are greatly enhanced by 3D. But similar to how when movies or the motion picture was first came out, the first thing they did was take every radio star and threw them into the TV. Sorry, TV, not movies. They threw them on TV, just taking the radio show and putting it on TV and saying that translates. I think the same is happening today, where we're taking 2D graphs, 2D presentations and translating it into spatial 3D, and we're still sort of doing incremental things. And I can show you a few graphs here that you can only do in 3 dimensions that are, I think, relatively novel and new. And I say that because I think it's still a space yet to be explored. That's, you know, whenever I give a talk, you know, I'm like the 3D guy in data viz, which is a weird thing to, not weird thing, but I guess more controversial sometimes in the data visualization world. But I think it's also a component of the technology we have available to us. So yes, looking at a 3D picture on a flat, static 2D field definitely doesn't make sense. But when you have the ability to move around, when you have the ability to go into different technologies to utilize the 3D, it makes a ton of sense and arguably more sense. And I think that little hurdle, it's almost like we've all accepted in the movies that we're going to go into this 3D world, but then when we see 3D data viz, we're like, no, you can't do that. So it's a kind of a funny little conundrum there, but I'm not sure if that, yeah, totally makes sense. But yeah, so let me keep trucking here. So I'm going to quickly show you guys a bit of the Flow editor, which will just hopefully help codify sort of what we do at Flow and sort of how this all fits together. So this is the editor. It's just a website, so you can go to this on any computer, and then you can load in your data as a CSV file, or you can pull from a data library. We can build a data integration to a company. Right now I'm just pulling in, this is life expectancy data. So we're looking at the different countries, different year combinations, life expectancy. We also have some income data, as well as the log of income. And what we're going to do is start to put this together. So right away, we're seeing every dot come into place, and every dot is a row of the data sets. So it is a thing. So if you think of it like a survey, each dot is a person that took the survey. We're taking that dot and going from perspective to show different views of it. And what I'm going to do is create another step, which is the equivalent of adding a keyframe into an animation or a slide into a PowerPoint deck. And then I'm going to start to add some additional information here. So I'm going to put life expectancy on this height axis, and let's just add a depth axis and look at the different continents. And so here where we're starting to see things come into shape, let me turn this back off. And in some ways, what you can see here is, you know, over the last, really the last 100 years, that life expectancy has increased all around almost every country. And in some ways, that's humanity's greatest success, that we live longer, our children are more likely to survive. But that within here, there's always these very low points. And we can start to investigate that a little further here. So let me turn on the continent, and we can do more. So we can add a color scheme in here based on something like the continents. Oops. And let me go ahead and add some connection lines, which is a fancy way to say I'm connecting these dots together in a logical way. And let's actually start to pull this apart a bit, because we're starting with a lot of noise, and just look at one date in particular. And I'm actually going to turn this back into countries, and I'm going to add a filter to look at the years between 1915 and 20. And so we used to ask people what they thought this was, but we don't ask anymore because it's all too apparent. But this is the 1918 Spanish flu and its impact on life expectancy around the globe. And I think it's just one of these, just amazing data points when you see it, especially in a data visualization, see this dramatic drop across the globe. And you know, as we move forward, there's more we can look at. So I'm not going to go through all the iterations. The point is not to really talk as much about making this meaningful, and more so sort of the interface and the options and what you can do here. So the whole point is the no-code environment for building these data visualizations and data stories, and then being able to add in text and other annotation layers to actually narrate or add that story element to the content. Here, what I'm doing is actually adding an annotation line to say I want to point something out, etc. There's overlay text we can add, but just like before, after I've created it, I can publish it by clicking this enable public link, and this is now live on the web, and you can go through it individually on your own. And let me just pull up one thing real quick. So after you've published it, you have the ability to embed this on your website. So just as a quick example of that, it can live as sort of its own little embedded iframe so that people can still interact and go through the story independently. I think one thing that's sort of cool and sort of to the side here is just like before, you can actually start a live meeting, and it will be a live meeting embedded on a other person's website as an iframe, which I don't know if that all makes sense, but you can actually see people moving around in this space if you click the right buttons. So anyways, that's just one sort of modality by which you're able to present. So this idea that you can create a flow once, then build these materials both to present it asynchronously, but then also have the power to actually go through the story in person during these meetings and after. That's part of the power. It's not just the one meeting. It's not just the one report you send. It's the thing you send before the meeting itself, the thing after the meeting, the thing you keep revisiting and updating. So it's this idea of something being more alive and living. And there's a lot of examples I can't show that are our client work, so our enterprise work, that it's really interesting. It's goes more into like scenario planning situations. Where you can actually change values on the fly and see how that impacts the end result. I wish I could show you, but I can't show that one, unfortunately, but I will go ahead and go through this one next, which is a little bit of a longer story, but I think shows some different elements of data storytelling in this ecosystem that I think will be interesting. But before I do that, let me just make sure there's no other questions or anything else you'd like me to make sure to cover here in the last 25 minutes. Okay, cool. So we'll do this, and then I think for at least the last minute, I'm going to force everyone to go into AR mode. So if you have an iPhone, I'm going to request that you download one app for me. And it's called WebXR Viewer by Mozilla. So this is only for iPhones. If you have an Android phone, it's fine. But Safari has not implemented WebXR support yet, but it's on the roadmap, so it is coming. It's just not here yet. So in the meantime, this is the one sort of workaround we have for iPhones. So I'm just gonna let you guys know about that in case you want to get that onto your phone prior. Okay, so let's actually start this meeting. And I will put this into the chat window like before. And what we're going to talk through is the Texas power outage, which I think is a fascinating story. And actually, I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I think I realized that one this is the offline version. Sorry, give me 1 second. Sorry about that. You guys are seeing a little bit of the sausage making here. Okay, this is better. So I'm going to kick everyone out of this meeting, sorry, and put you into the other one. So same story, just I removed this overlay text, which says I didn't get in the way for this. So this will be the new. Okay, so I know you didn't sign up today to learn about power supply in Texas, but we're also going to learn a little bit about alternating current today, and I think it's fascinating. So hopefully you guys do as well. And I think the elements here that I want you guys to focus on, especially as more in business and more on the data storytelling side, is that most of the visuals I'm going to go through are relatively flat. But it's this idea that you can actually see them all in tandem together and progress the story along in a way that is more dynamic, that I think is really the interesting thing about this presentation in particular. I'm going to leave the avatars on, but if they start getting in the way, do let me know. So one thing I'm going to emphasize is that we have not focused that much on the avatars because we're trying to integrate into everything as opposed to being our own platform. Yeah, so just so you guys to put a little caveat out there for that. Okay, so to understand this story, you're going to need to understand two things. One is that the power that is coming into our residence, I'm actually going to hide avatars for them. So one thing to understand is the frequency of electric. Oh, sorry. This. Sorry, I just need to check one thing. Oh, I'm sorry. I've not given this presentation in a moment, and I realized I forgot part of it. Okay, so the first thing to understand here is that the frequency that's coming into our homes, the frequency of the current is 60 hertz. And if it drops below this 59.4 hertz threshold, it actually is causing damage to any generators or any motors that are on the AC grid, because they're all magnetically coupled. And so it's getting offline and actually causing damage. And so as a result, all these power plants have a built-in breaker that if it's below this threshold for more than 9 minutes, it actually will turn off and disconnect from the power system. And so when that happens, it actually has the impact of lowering the frequency further, which basically causes this cascading effect and leads to an overall blackout. So I don't think people realize, but there's an outage in Texas back in February that it killed 75 people. It actually cost more money than Katrina. It was $195 billion. And it was 3 days that people were out of power. I think it was 4.5 million customers that were affected. And this was, Texas that's normally warm, and it got super cold. And people don't realize that there was actually 4 minutes away from a complete blackout, one that would have lasted almost a month as opposed to 3 days. And so the things to remember or to acknowledge here are one, that Texas is its own grid. And there's the interconnect and the Western interconnect, which is why it couldn't draw power from elsewhere. And that we're going to look at 4 factors sort of simultaneously here. We're going to look at the temperature, the demand for electricity in megawatts, the supply, as well as the price in US dollars. So if we start with the temperature, the very basic story is that it got cold. I actually have more details hidden in here that I've looked at different cities, but I took it out towards the end. But the idea here, yes, it got below freezing. It's typically in the 50s, and it's now below freezing in Texas. As a result, people are actually using more electricity. Back in 2011, which was the last outage, they're well above that peak. So they're up at 72 gigahertz here. So it's getting colder. People are using more electricity. And on the capacity side, there's 108 gigawatts total capacity in Texas. And that is made up of, so these are the component parts. So it's made up of gas, wind, coal, solar, nuclear. And at the time, pretty much everything was operating as normal. But on that first day, we see the first decline in generation capacity, more specifically within wind generation. So we see this drop of almost 40% in wind generation that sticks around. But still, we're okay. We're at 94 gigawatts. And along the same time, if I start to play this out, no customers' power has been turned off. You can see some supply constraints, but I think what you can really see is when you look at the price of electricity during this time, the one beautiful thing about free market dynamics is that the market doesn't lie if there's something wrong. And so seeing the price jump from $30 to $300 in a 2-day span is already sort of an indicator that something might be up. And so let me move forward just one more step and not scale up that y-axis and show that magnitude of the increase. So now suddenly we're increasing the price pretty dramatically, even though the price has not, or the power has not been turned off anywhere. So we're now jumping to $7,000. So I'll update that axis. And so clearly something's going on behind the scenes that shows something's up. And so it's on that night that we see the big loss in generation that we're below that 72 gigawatts now, and so power must be cut. And so if we think of ourselves back in the operations center and looking back at that frequency graph, there's essentially, when we turn off customers, it has the effect of increasing the alternating current frequency, which helps stabilize the grid. And anytime a power plant goes offline, it has the effect of dropping the frequency. And so this interplay basically keeps going. And it was at 1:51 in the morning that they went below that threshold. So, and that's when they turned 3 gigawatts worth of customers off. And just to give that some context in terms of magnitude, back in 2011, the last outage, they turned off 4 gigawatts total for the whole outage. And so these calls are not small calls to turn off customers. And so they turn off 3 gigawatts, and then if a very stressful 4 minutes pass before they then issue another 3.5 gigawatts of customers turned off. And that does have the effect of then getting them back above that curve and beyond sort of that moment. But I think that little moment right there, was literally 4 minutes away from that complete blackout. And so in that period, so that cycle sort of continues as capacity's offline, they have to turn off more customers. And so this is the whole picture. That whole little red area is basically what they couldn't serve, demand that was not served. And that is 20 gigawatts total, 4.5 million customers, $195 billion in damage and 70 deaths. And it looks so innocent and small here. And I think it's just shocking to me just how sensitive the system is. I think if anything, it showed the sensitivity in the US more so than anything. And just this last part, so it did actually reach its threshold of 9,000. That was actually the cap on the markets, and things did come back after 3 days. So yeah, that is the story of what happened in Texas, and all the different components that sort of played together to understand what happens. So I'll pause there. I would love to get your take on the story and any questions you have, and I'll turn back on Avatar so we can all see each other moving around here as well.
So how does it go if a company would be interested, so they get access to your software and then they can play around with the company data? Or how will be the path?
Yes. So we typically start customers. I like to say we put training wheels on in the start. The hardest part is not learning the software. The hardest part is, all right, now I have like 3 dimensions and I have the ability to really build and increment steps, and there's some new features. The learning how to build is actually I think the harder parts, to be innovative, to know what to build. So we try to help customers start there. But yes, the idea is that we are a SaaS software provider, but we do offer some services for our enterprise customers, especially to get going. And I don't know if you guys have been doing this too, but you can interact with all of these dots as well. And you're seeing something here we call highlighting. So I have the ability to highlight contents and point that out to you. This is, I like this graph a lot because it's showing that the percentage as 100%, this line on top, so you can see the difference from 100% capacity. And you can also see that this is the aggregate sum, or that these aggregate to the total supply. So I just like this chart type in general. I think it's kind of unique and interesting, but I could show a bunch of other ones. But yeah, what other questions do you guys have? Otherwise, I'm gonna
would you actually share the link before you actually present, or would you actually say, okay, I'm just walking through the story and share the link afterwards? Because I feel that everybody's getting pretty distracted, and even if you're not, let's say, familiar with moving in a 3D environment, you're all over the place and you don't get anything. And so, or like have a mode where you say, okay, now I'm in presenter mode. Everybody's gonna follow me. No, you do exploring.
Yeah.
And once I'm done, you can go and explore, because yeah, I felt it was very distracting. So.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's I think it's likely definitely something to consider. I guess I have mixed feelings about that. In some sense, I'm actually encouraged that you're distracted, because it means you're interested and you're exploring and you're paying attention. So on one hand, it's better that you're distracted than just not interested. So there's that element to it. But on that point, just this idea of like, even when I started, I usually start by just sharing my screens. You're focused on me, then you focus on the content, and then I get you into AR mode. I think that's a better way to approach it. It's like incremental, as opposed to, all right, everyone jump in first and then we'll go from there. So that's just one sort of thing. But yeah, that's a really good point. I wouldn't say we have it all figured out, but You know,
I mean, my personal user experience was now, okay, this is really cool, but I didn't really follow your story. I only heard it like half what you were actually telling me. So the information did not really convey because I was busy, you know, moving the screen and moving around. And, you know, sometimes I was all upside down and like, okay, where the heck am I going? So yeah, that was interesting for me. Okay.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that insight and input. And we are working on a few things that limit. So it's sort of like this balance of how much freedom do we want to grant? And on one hand, we actually used to not have steps and allow people to sort of go everywhere. Like you could explore your own story to a certain degree. But you'll also see here that we have this ability to make people presenter. We can also view your stream. So everyone is locked into the same camera position, and then you're forced to move with me. You don't have that freedom of movement anymore. I just don't typically use it. So it's something we're definitely actively exploring, and a really good points. But I also just encourage that.
Maybe there's also different stages. Let's say if you have been doing this for a couple of times, it won't be a problem. But if you have like newbies, you might want to give them some time to get into this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a progression. And yeah, definitely. And I see some hands up.
Yeah, Mary, I can start. I have two questions. The first one would be, have you been approached by any like educational institutes, like high schools and so on? Because I feel that's probably something that should become a qualification, at least in the next years, to being able to like tell a story with data and having that. So is there something you worked on? And the second question would be, do you use this tool sometimes to win arguments at home? Like when there's things to do?
My wife's over here, so I can't be too honest. But I love that actually. I totally lost the first question you asked.
Oh, and educational institutes, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, since we started building this social following, we have a wait list of people on the access to the Flow editor. So we have our enterprise customers that are in today, and we're adding more people, and half of that list is educators. So it's definitely resonated with an EDU component. I think that's a huge driver. You know, that if anything, it's the audience most likely to use it and have value from it, because you want to set yourself apart, you want to be innovative, you're learning something new. So I think we're definitely going to go more there. But I will say, in terms of just from a startup lens, we still do need to try to sell workers, survive. And so we're still going to focus on enterprise and sort of high ROI use cases too. But yeah, we're definitely going to have a pretty large EDU component too. And if you guys, we are at a point where if you guys want to champion that, especially we don't really have as many contacts in Europe. If you guys have any initiative to want to explore that further, would be happy to discuss more.
So maybe I'm no. So thank you very much. It was very interesting. I was wondering, how long does it usually take you to make such a presentation or such a graph? And a second question related to it. So do you intend to use the service kind of an consultancy? So you are telling the story and building the graphs, or should it be like software based that your customers can use it on their own in the long run?
Yep. So the last point, definitely software based. So software as a service is the end goal. It just tends to look like we're doing a little more service heavy in the beginning, just because it's a new platform, new system for people to learn. And so it's a little more holding their hands than throwing it over the fence. But that is the end goal. And I think students are thinking, this last batch, I'm pretty confident that from that last group of people going through, that people have the ability to do this themselves. And I'd say on that point, it's sort of like, in a similar sense of saying, like, how long does it take to build a PowerPoint? I could build a PowerPoint in 10 minutes and it's probably going to be pretty bad, or I could spend like 6 months and make it this just amazing, like, killer thing. And I think the same is true for this. You can build a pretty bad flow pretty fast. But, it's all sort of like the minute little tweaks and changes. So what I find is that it, on average, it's like takes a couple hours. I'd say more than anything, just like I'm sure you guys aren't surprised, data cleaning and data cleaning still takes the longest part, and just the calculations and sort of getting your data and the story right, I think is way harder than the actual programming or building of the visualizations themselves in many instances. So it's working on that narrative and story that I think is often lacking and often can provide the most benefit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Oh.
So we previously had this guest lecture about visual impairment and blindness, and I'm wondering how you are actually dealing with those kind of issues, especially when it comes to embedding this kind of tool in the software on someone's landing page or website. How you deal with that, if there are any, or if you consider it.
Yeah, great question. So it's something we've spent some time thinking about, but I will say it's something we probably need to spend more time on. We try to run all of our colors through color blindness checker and accessibility there, but inherently, moving into augmented reality and virtual reality for visual display of information, I think we still have to emphasize the visual display of information. So it's hard to add other components for auditory signals and other things, but it's something we need to do more into. I'll be frank and transparent. It's just not something we've been able to prioritize yet, just because we're trying to survive and grow and all these other things. But I just don't. Yeah, so I wish I had a better answer off the hand for that, but that's just sort of where we are. But if you have ideas or suggestions on how to translate that, I think it'd be hugely impactful and helpful.
All right, yeah, good luck with that.
Thank you. Okay, so I know we have 6 minutes here left, and I want to do something a little more fun and experimental, and maybe break the system. Let's see. So
there was one more question in the chat, which is how did COVID impact your business?
Oh, great question. In a surprisingly positive way, which is weird to say, but in some sense, I feel like COVID was actually a boom for data visualization in general. I think it's one of the first times where we as a society are just suddenly all looking at graphs like nonstop, and people are presenting graphs, and it's this moment where I think we're starting to realize that the antidote is dead, that we hear the anecdotal story and we sort of just are like, we've heard too many. It doesn't resonate anymore. And we want to know what's really going on by looking at the data. And I think that it's really helped drive adoption of both data visualization. The world's talking about flattening the curve. I can't say how many people have been talking about curves right before that. And that's, as a result of that, plus the fact that we are trying to enhance mostly virtual communication, I think those two interplay in a way that has been very helpful for us, and seeing the problem. So hopefully that addresses your question. Okay, let's try this. Okay, so I'm going to ask people to get their phones here, and we're going to do sort of an experimental going into AR and possibly breaking our multi-user platform. Let's see. Let me just check one thing. Okay, never mind. Sorry, let me check one thing. Okay, so sorry, I'm being quiet over here, but started. So I just need to test one thing real quick. Okay, cool. Okay, great. So I'm going to pull this QR code again and ask that people go into AR mode on this. And this is just like more of an experiment. This was showing, this is actually, it's kind of like a math trick a bit, but if you plot, how do I describe it? It's basically looking at all the prime numbers plotted using radians, and you sort of create this pattern. So anyways, I'm going to put the link up here. This is more of like a fun sort of like combining music and data together, a little more data arts, not super meaningful, but definitely will push your device to the edge. So we'll see if your devices have the power to go through this. And I'll join on my phone too and see if we can all join in the fun here. And if you guys know how to, I would love it if anyone, if you go into AR mode, and I would really encourage you guys to try to go into AR mode and have this in your room. If you're able to try to, you know how to do a screen recording, as well as keep your audio on or don't have your phone in silent mode for this, that will be beneficial. So I'm going to wait for people to get in and let this load. Stick on my side too. Cool. But there's something really, I think is just really cool about the when you're in AR mode on your phone and someone's moving, there is like a one-to-one relationship between their motion and what you see. So the fact that you see them move a meter is like they are actually moving a meter in real life. So there's this certain sense of presence, which I just really like. Sorry, let me open this as well. Cool. So if you're going to start screen recording, try to do that now. And anyone having issues going into AR mode or need?
Yes, I actually do.
Yeah. So after you hit the AR button, and let me share my screen that way real quick. Sorry for going over just a little bit here.
As soon as I'm clicking on the AR button, there is like they're like featured flows suggesting.
So I think let me pull back up the QR code and I'll point you to that. So refresh. Okay, so this is going to be the URL, and so you'll get that from scanning the QR code that's going to be on my screen here. But once I join, so I join here in this mode, and I see the AR button in the top of my screen. And so if I hit that AR button, by default, it will throw me into the scene. It looks like it's adding a background, but anyways, from there, I can actually recenter. So I can click this recenter button and I can place it on the ground somewhere. Excuse my little bit of a mess here, but yeah, then you'll have this placed in your environment and can move around. So let me pull up that QR code again so that you have it, or it should be on my screen presentation here, and that should drop you in directly to this URL. So let me know if that works for you. So Android, this does work. It actually works out of the box, just in Chrome. So we have it's a better experience on, or not better, it's just an easier one to get into. So I'm going to record this on my side too. So I'm recording this partially because this is definitely going to push the performance of our system, and you will see if we survive.
Could you actually turn out the avatars, because like now
sure.
we see a lot of phones. And it's
yeah,
hard to observe the data.
As long as everyone's in AR mode, they won't interfere with one another. I'm going to leave them on for now, but I'll put the URL to the direct one, and you can go through it solo after. If that's okay. Yeah, yeah, so I totally hear you that it's a little distracting, but I think it's going to be cool to see everyone come along with us. So give me just one moment. Okay, here we go. So this is going to be sort of close things out, a little more fun. And yeah, thank you guys all for having me today and listening to me go through this. All right, so I'm going to turn my audio off and let's have
Michael, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Oh, thank you guys all for joining for that little bit of experiment and going around your room. And yeah, I should have turned the avatars off. It got a little bit in the way, so sorry about that. But yeah, I think that's about it. So I know I'm a little over time here, Daniela. So thanks so much for having me. And yeah, it's really been fun. And hopefully this resonates with you. And feel free to reach out to me and Michael at flow.gl. Or you can go to our website, flowimmersive.com. And yeah, feel free to reach out. I think you guys it seems like you guys have gotten a crash course or not a crash course, but have had a lot today. So hopefully this resonated and yeah, thanks again.
Thank you so much, Michael. This has been amazing. I mean, the last part was just a firework. Like, oh my God, you're putting me into the uncomfortable position because I need to go back to PowerPoint tomorrow. And I don't know how I'm going to do that and how I'm going to keep people engaged the way that you just did. So this was absolutely fantastic. I mean, yes, thank you so much for showing us where the whole topic and world of data visualization is going in the future. I think this is where we're going. I mean, already now, you probably just gained a lot more followers on your TikTok as well. So for everyone, if you want to hear on any or see any updates, please follow Michael on TikTok as well. And as he said, feel free to reach out to him. And this is what these guest lectures are for, not just to know about all of these different new products that are out there, but also to increase your network so that you can also implement those tools in your day-to-day life, either for winning discussions at home. By the way, Eva, I think that was a great inspiration. So once I get my hands on this tool, I will certainly use that at home as well. And also obviously in your business life. So again, Michael, thank you so much for this amazing last hour. And I can't thank you enough for that. And I think you're just starting your day. So have a wonderful Friday.
Thank you.
And everyone else, we are going to wrap up today, and I'm going to see you all tomorrow again at 9. And again, sorry, I will have PowerPoints for you. Sorry, no AR experience there, but I hope you'll have a wonderful, relaxing evening. And then I will see you again fresh and early tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I'm going to stick around a little bit in case you have some questions, but other than that, feel free to log off, and I will see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Bye.